In our Parsha, Parsha's Bahar, referring to Mount Sinai. And one of the things that he speaks about in our Parsha is the laws of buying and selling. V'chi siknu me'im amitecha. If someone shall buy something from his friend, v'chi simkeru mimkar amitecha. If you'll sell something to your friend. So the laws of buying and selling are brought in our Parsha. And there's a very interesting law that's brought down in the Shulchan Aruch, which is basically the halachic perspective of what says in the Torah. And the law is like this. What happens if someone wants to sell something that isn't yet here in the world, or buy something that isn't here in the world? For example, let's say I say, you know what? I want to sell you the fruit of 2 years' time. Can I do such a thing? Is that applicable? Can I actually buy that? Let's say, can I regret after a year's time? Can I say, you know what? No, I still want my fruit. So the truth is, and this is what it's brought down in the Shulchan Aruch, is that if I buy you something, if I sell you something virtual that does not exist yet in the world, I can always return because it's not yet here. In other words, there is no one's relying on you 100% that you're actually going to sell it to me because of the fact that these fruits do not exist yet. So in other words, to make it simple, the law is that you can only buy and sell things that exist currently in the world. If they exist now in the world, if they are here around us, you can you can sell them and buy them. So for example, if I have a tree now with fruit on the tree, I can sell those fruit because the fruit are there currently on the tree. If I don't have fruit on the tree and I want to sell the fruit of next year or 2 years' time, I cannot just randomly sell random fruit. They don't exist. No one really relies on the fact that they will exist, even though maybe 99% that they'll grow. But still, if they're not here now, so there's nothing much to do about it. And the kinyan, which is the method of buying, does not exist. So just to make this clear, I want to share with you a very interesting story that I happened to read. Actually, it was last night. I read the story, a very interesting book about the times and the days of Am Yisrael, starting from Berlin of 300 years ago, something like that. The Jews there in that generation. And the story is about a very rich person by the name of Daniel. Excuse me, sorry. The person was called Daniel Yaffe. That's his name, Daniel. Excuse me, whoops. So this person, Daniel Yaffe, he was one of the 2 richest people of Berlin and probably of all Germany, the Jewish people. He had another friend of his that was also very rich. And this Daniel Yaffe never ever wanted people to speak about his past. And why? Because before he became rich, he was a stable boy. Before he got rich, he worked in a small village, in a small town, together with another friend. He worked there as a stable boy. He took care of the horses, fed them, took them out, prepared them for a ride, etc. And one day, this Daniel Yaffe is in the stable and he's got his friend there with him as well. His friend's name was David. And he sees that David has a he has this nice knife. You know, these today they have these Switzerland Swiss knives. So he had this nice knife, and he told him, listen, I want to buy this from you. I promise you one day I will be very, very rich, and I want to buy this from you. I cannot afford paying you now, but my plan is to travel to Berlin, and there I'm going to start opening my own business, and I'll start doing my own trade, and I'll have a lot of money. And I promise you, you give me this knife, I will pay you all of my money, more than 10,000, whatever the coin was then. I don't know what it is. 10,000 gold, let's say. So in other words, I'll keep for myself just 10,000 gold, which is it was a lot of money. And I'll give you the rest of my money. All in condition that you give me now the knife. So the friend David starts laughing at him. He tells him, no, you don't have a chance. You want me just to give you for free the knife. That's basically what you're saying. How are you going to turn rich overnight? How are you going to suddenly become a rich man? But Daniel says, no, believe me, I'm going to work very, very hard. This is something that I've been dreaming all my life. I want to become rich. Sell me this and you'll become rich as well, because I'll give you all of my fortune. I'll keep just 10,000 for myself and the rest will go for you. He says, you know what? Here it is. B'vakasha, take my knife. Few days later, Daniel goes on his way, travels to Berlin. This person, David, stays in the same town, and he stays as a stable boy, and he doesn't see much success, and he's in his house. Daniel travels to Berlin, and he starts working very hard. He starts working at the beginning as an accountant. He taught himself the numbers. He taught himself the mathematics that was necessary for the accounting. And what happened is that at a certain point, he was the manager of a big bank. A few years later, he already had enough money to open his own bank. And that's how he became very, very rich. One of the two richest Jews of Germany in those days. And what happened is that he forgot about the story. He forgot about the knife. He forgot about his promise. And he lived his life peacefully and calmly. In the meantime, David, in his poor city, he was working very hard, but unfortunately he didn't make it. And what happened is that he had a daughter that was growing old. This daughter was already 20 years old, and 20 years is a time for a shidduch. It's a time to get married. But unfortunately, he had no money. And in those days, if you had no money, so it was very, very hard to get married, because you needed to pay for the expenses of the wedding. But not only that, in those days, the father of the bride needed to give a big amount of money to the groom, to the family's groom, the groom's family. So it was very, very hard for him. And one day his neighbor walks in and he tells him, listen, David, your daughter needs to get married. And I'll tell you a secret. My son wants to marry her, but I'm not prepared to let him marry your daughter unless you give 1,000 gold. 1,000 gold is an enormous amount of money for him. And David cannot afford it. David says, no, I'm sorry, I don't have the money. And he tells him, you know what? There is a person, a very rich person in Berlin. And this rich person is Daniel, your old friend. He'll for sure remember you. Go to him, ask for money, and with that money that he'll give you, you'll pay off the wedding. Then David says, I've never asked for money from people. I don't want to do it now. Listen, if you want your daughter to get married, that's the only way. So David says, you know what? I'll travel to him. He travels to him, and when he was going, he remembers the story. He remembers the knife. He remembers the promise of his friend. But he said, you know what? I'm going to try my luck. I don't know if he remembers. So he comes to Daniel. He comes to him, Daniel Yaffe. He comes to him in Berlin, in Germany, and he tells him, this is your friend David. I need 1,000 gold for my wedding, for my daughter's wedding. Daniel starts laughing. He says, here's 1 gold. This is what I usually give poor people. I can give you 1 gold for 1,000 golds. And then he reminds him the story. He reminds him the story of the knife. And he says maybe he didn't expect anything because it was just like a random promise. And what happened is that suddenly Daniel remembered all the details. And suddenly he understood, it shook him, but he understood that he's now a poor man. He's just got 10,000 gold. All of his fortune actually truly belongs to David, to his friend. So he tells his friend, wait a moment, please wait here. And he before he runs, he tells his wife, we might have just lost all of our money. He goes to the rabbi of the city and he tells him, what is the din in this case? Do I actually owe him the money or not? And the rabbi told him what we said at the beginning about in our Parsha. In Parshas Bahar, we learn about the laws of buying and selling. And in these laws of buying and selling, we know that the one important rule that the Rambam, the Maimonides brings it down, and the Shulchan Aruch brings it down, is that it's got to be something that exists now in the world. If not, no one relies on it, right? If I'll come over to some person and I'll tell you, you know what? Do you want to buy my watch in 10 years' time? So even if he agrees and he says yes, he's giving you money for free. Because who's going to remember 10 years' time? Who knows what's going to happen in 10 years' time? Who knows the true value in 10 years' time? So therefore, in that case, when a person tries to sell something that doesn't really exist, there's no sale. As Reb Daniel hears that, he feels much better. He knows that the money that he owns is truly his and it does not belong to his friend. He goes back to his house and his friend Daniel is still waiting for him. And he tells his friend David, here is 10,000 gold. His friend was shocked. He couldn't believe it. Thank you so much. I can't believe it. And he told him the whole story. He told the rabbi about the case. And the rabbi said that there is no obligation for me to give you my fortune. But nevertheless, I'm a good person. And here you go, 10,000 gold. So you can marry your child and you can live with the rest. So this is a great story. I think just because of the honesty that Daniel showed. He showed the honesty that he was prepared to give all of his fortune to his friend, even if his friend wasn't really demanding it. But he consulted with the rabbi. It's another important lesson that we've always got to consult with the rabbi about certain things that we have in our lives, if it's difficulty, if it's halachic dilemmas, etc. So once again, let's summarize the law. The law is that I can sell something that exists currently in the world. But I cannot sell something that does not yet exist, but will come later on into the world. Okay. Chassidus always likes to explain these laws in a spiritual way as well. So what is the spiritual meaning of the law that a person cannot sell something that does not exist. And the truth is that the famous book of Tanya speaks about our struggle that we face daily in our lives, the fight against the Yetzer Hara. And here it's divided between two people in the world. The majority of the people in the world are considered Beinonim, or at least they are on the path to become Beinonim. They should become Beinonim. Hashem wants us to become Beinonim. And what is this Beinoni? A Beinoni is someone that cannot control his heart. He cannot control his brain. But the one thing that he does control, and this is the fundamental lesson in Tanya, is that he can control his gates. The gates of a person are his thoughts, his speech, his actions. Those three keys a person can control, which means even if we might face a challenge from the Yetzer Hara, we can say, you know what? I'm not going to say it. I'm going to close my mouth. Even if the Yetzer Hara wants me to do something, to act in a certain way, in a bad way, I can tell the Yetzer Hara, no, I'm sorry, I'm not going to behave in that way. Thinking as well. Even though I'm not pure good, my inner side isn't 100% good and connected to Hashem, but nevertheless, I can say, don't think about it. Don't practice our bad nature. Because there's two parts to a human being. There's his traits, and there is his external actions. The traits of a human being, that's something that's very hard to change. But his actions, his external actions, that are what he says, what he speaks, what he thinks, and what he does, those three things, those are something that the person can control. He can make sure that nothing bad will enter those three gates. And this is the secret of the Beinoni. The Beinoni cannot guarantee anything in the future. He cannot sell anything in the future, which means he cannot sell something that does not exist. He cannot guarantee that everything will be okay tomorrow. He cannot guarantee that everything will be okay in 2 hours. He's still got this challenge, this ongoing challenge every moment of his life. And this is a hard life because he's always on this battle. And that represents the idea of the fact that someone cannot sell something that does not exist. The Beinoni says, you know what, I will guarantee you that I'm never going to sin. There is no guarantee. Because in a few days, things might change. When it comes to a tzaddik, a person that's truly complete, that means that his traits as well, they are also in a very good position. That means that his actions aren't only because of the gates that he's keeping safe, but it starts way before that. It starts from the inner part of a tzaddik. A true tzaddik is a person that has no bad. He faces no bad. He cannot sin. He cannot do bad things. So in other words, if we want to apply it to the law that we just spoke about before, the difference is between selling fruit and selling the tree. If a person would say, you know what, I'm going to sell you this tree, great. You can accept it. It's a very good thing. The tree is something good. It's not something we're selling in the future. The tree exists now. And then as a result, the fruit for tens and hundreds of years will belong to you. That's selling the tree. And that's a tzaddik. He has the tree that he can sell. because the tree refers to his being, and the tzaddik's being is truly complete, pure, with no bad in it involved. On the other hand, when we talk about a Beinoni, the majority of the people around us, which we are between Rashayim to Beinonim, we are on the go to try and become a Beinoni, there we cannot sell the tree. The tree does not belong to us. The tree is the human being, and unfortunately, the bad traits that exist in us aren't going to disappear. And it's very hard to change it. But nevertheless, we can sell fruit. And we can sell the fruit that exists now. The fruit that are here around us at this moment. Those fruit are fruit that we can sell, guarantee, which means our good deeds, our thoughts that are positive, what we say that's good, and our good deeds, all of those things are something that we can sell here and now. We cannot guarantee the future. And that's why we cannot sell anything of the future, because there's no guarantee. We have still bad inside us that might erupt. And that's why the Beinoni is always facing this challenge. So to summarize what we learned today is we learned a special law in the laws of buying and selling. The law is that you cannot sell something that does not exist, because people don't rely on that. We spoke about the great story with Daniel Yaffe and his friend, how his friend sold him that knife, even though Daniel Yaffe couldn't pay at that moment. And that's why it was basically for free. That's why Daniel Yaffe wasn't obligated to pay him that amount that he promised, because he didn't really sell it. He didn't have the money at that time. But nevertheless, Daniel Yaffe was a kind person, and he treated him very nicely, giving him for free a big amount of money. We spoke about the work that we do in our lives, the Beinoni's life, and even the evil person's life, because most of us are evil. This is something that sometimes might be a bit shocking, but that's the truth. And if you want to hear more about it, so we've got the Tanya Shiur every Monday at 8 o'clock at Nisim Bachar 31 Ubacharta. There's a center there. There's a Tanya Shiur every Monday night. And we spoke about the Beinoni and about the evil people. And the Beinoni cannot guarantee his deeds in the future. He is selling fruit. And if the fruit are here now, you can accept it from him. If now he did a mitzvah, if now he was careful about what he thought or what he spoke, you can take it from him. On the other hand, when we come to speak about a tzaddik, he actually sells the tree, because his tree, his being, his traits are purely good. Shavua Tov.